Hello everybody, this is Roger with Roger Reviews, and today we're going to be going over how to sharpen a chainsaw, And these are a new product that came out like a year or two ago from Steel. They're to help people sharpen their saws. And I know there's a lot of gimmicks out there and a lot of things that should work or don't work, but I actually like these little devices. So I'm going to grab a couple chainsaws and we're going to go over a few things and see what these are all about. So just hang tight for a second. We're also going to be going over electric chainsaws and gas-powered chainsaws and pros and cons. So first thing you want to do is you want to have the right size file for your chainsaw. So there's usually like 3 sizes. You can either get, there's like metric or standard. Usually all your top handle saws and all your pull saws have a small like Pico chain, and then there's even a smaller one that they have now. And I don't even know if people sharpen, they're so tiny, but you have a small file. I just call them small, medium, and large. Most of you like your MS250s and stuff like that use a medium size file. And the most important thing when you're sharpening a saw is consistency and using the right file to do the job. So you want to make sure your file, when you put it in there, it's not real bound up, and you're not, if you have to force it in there, it's usually not the right size file. And usually your homeowner saws are usually basically the middle size. Most people are going to use the middle size file. So what you want to do, I don't know if it says it on here or not, but 4.8 millimeter, I don't know. There's a metric and there's a standard size. You're just going to have to get with your local dealership, and I don't know if they're going to use metric or standard. That way I'm not going to tell you any file sizes get you confused. But what you want to do is use your like a medium size file, and there's little lines on your saw, on your chain, and basically what you want to do is you want to follow that line, and that'll give you your angle. And basically what you want to do is you want to put that the file at the same angle as that line, because a lot of people, what they'll do is they think the pointier they get their saw, the sharper it is. It's actually not true. What you want to do is, if anything, you want to bring it back and make that angle less on the top. Is basically what you're doing. That chisel, if you make it too pointed, it's not going to cut anything. I had a guy sharpen saws that worked for me, and he made them all to a point. They were sharp, but they hardly would take anything away. It's kind of like a chisel. If you have a chisel and you're cutting like this, you're going to take a lot more. But if you're cutting at an angle, you're going to barely take any meat. So if anything, you want a flatter angle. If you want a more aggressive saw, I can show you here. See how the point, you're basically, this is the point here. The more pointy you get, the less material you're going to grab. If you bring it back this way, the more material. So if anything, you want to bring and lessen the angle. So what I usually do is I follow the same angle as the saw came with. And another thing too is you want to sharpen your saw consistently. You want to sharpen it usually after you use it, because what will happen is if you can just sharpen your saw and just touch it up, just a few strokes, every time you use it, it's going to take less material off, and you're going to be able to keep the saw as close to factory as you can. If you wait too long and basically you wear your saw blade out, you're going to have to take a lot of material off, and what's going to happen, you're not going to be as consistent because you're going to have to take so much off. It's going to basically change the saw tooth a lot more than you would have if you would have just touched it up every time. So I would recommend every time you use your saw, just touch it up with a few strokes, like maybe 2 or 3 strokes, just to give that fine tuning. If you have to do 10 or 20 strokes on each tooth, it's going to be hard to stay consistent on each tooth on each side. Because what's going to happen is when you are inconsistent and you don't have the exact same sharpness on every tooth, especially from one side to the next, it's going to make your saw cut at an angle or banana cut. So it's really hard to get your saw exactly the same sharpness on every single tooth. Because even when you change your angle and you flip it over and you sharpen the other side, it's really hard to use the same exact angle and the same exact force and take the same amount of material off every single tooth. So like I said, I do 2 or 3 hits on each tooth. And if you can see, I follow the same exact angle that came on the saw, and I use like a little bit of an upward stroke, and I twist the file. I twist the file as I'm sharpening, and then every couple files I'll actually tap it and knock that dust off the file. So another thing too is you might want to wear gloves, because once the saw's sharp, if you slip, it'll really cut you. I've cut my hand up pretty good. Another thing is you want to make sure the chain brake is off, and you want to take your file or take a tool and push the chain. Because if you push it by hand, especially back this way, and you slip, you're going to cut the shit out of your hand. So basically, start at one point, and also too, you can like put a piece of tape here, and then that way you know when you come back to the original spot, you don't over sharpen. So basically, you just want to twist the blade or twist the file, and upward stroke, and follow that same exact angle that the saw came with. And I'm trying to show you the, you can see there's a little line, if you look real close, that you can follow. Some of them have it, some of them don't. So anyway, look on your saw and look on your chain and see if you can see that angle. There's a little line, and you just follow that same exact line when you're going around. And you sharpen each one. Every time you sharpen your saw, you count. If you do 2, do 2 on each one. If you do 3, 3, 4, 4, exactly. And you try to use the same exact pressure on each tooth, the same exact angle. And like I said, if you don't get them consistent, what you'll find is your saw will bind up, or it'll start twisting and banana cutting. You won't be able to cut straight. So it's very important to use the same exact pressure and the same exact angle as close as you can. Nobody's perfect, but you try to get it as perfect as you can. And once you're done sharpening that one side, you want to flip it over. And when you flip it, this is the hard part. You're going to be sharpening at a different angle, so it's going to be hard to stay consistent. So that's why it's important to follow that line. So I'm going to go ahead and do a few strokes here. I'm not going to sharpen the whole saw because that'll take like 10 minutes. So on the other side, you want to follow that same angle. So basically, this is straight, and then this is a 90, and then this here, I think you're about 22 degrees, 22, 23 degrees, but you just have to make sure that when you sharpen, you try to follow that same angle as what the factory is. And actually, my file is actually at a slightly up angle as well. So you're kind of pushing up and twisting, up and twisting. So you want to do like 2 or 3 strokes on each tooth. Make sure your chain brake is off, and then you want to push forward and sharpen this way, because if you push back with your hand and you slip, like I said, you're going to cut the shit out of your hand. And also too, if you slip off the tooth, a lot of times you can cut your knuckles up. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll put a rag or something down in case I slip, or I'll wear gloves. So basically, you just want to, this saw is pretty sharp, so I'm just basically just using this for demonstration purposes. So see how I'm pulling it, and it gets stuck, so you gotta be careful, because sometimes it'll slip, it'll get stuck and you'll use so much pressure, and then it'll release, and then that's when you slip and you get hurt. So just like this, just a few strokes on each one, and just do this every time you use your saw, just a few strokes. It's all it takes, just to get that little bit of sharpness back with the touch-up. And you'll know your saw will still be cutting, but it's a big difference if you just use that little couple strokes every time. And then that way your saw will last longer, and then that way you won't have to buy any chain, because you'll be able to keep the saw as sharp as possible and keep it as consistent as possible by using just a few strokes on each tooth. And like I said, it's easier to stay consistent if you only have to do a touch-up. Sometimes if you hit something like a piece of metal or concrete, you have to take a massive amount of each tooth. It's very hard to keep consistent, and usually that's what happens is when you hit something and you have to try to bring your chain back from a bad hit. That's usually when your saw gets off. But like I said, it's very easy if you just sharpen your saw more often, and that way you're not having to take as much material off. Anyway, this is Roger with Roger's Reviews on 101 how to sharpen a saw. There's a lot more to it than this. This is just a basic 101 just to get you guys familiar. Later on I can get more into detail, but that's pretty much it. I'm going to briefly describe the steel sharpening system. What's nice about this, if you're using just a regular file, you're not really hitting your little drag teeth right here. This is your depth gauge, and it basically determines how deep of a cut your chisel's going to make. And a lot of times guys will take a flat file and just touch that depth gauge a little bit, because what will happen is as you sharpen your tooth, this tooth gets closer and closer to the saw, and what will happen, no matter how sharp you get this chisel, it won't be able to bite because your depth gauge is going to be too high. And so I don't have a flat file with me except in here. What you want to do, pretend this is a flat file, you just want to take a few little strokes off this depth gauge, and when you file it down, it'll allow this chisel tooth to get more bite. But you got to be careful. If you take too much off this depth gauge, this will increase the bite on your saw, and it'll grab too much, and your saw will actually stop in its tracks. I had a guy grind these down one time with a grinder, and he took way too much off, and he ruined all my blades. I had to get all new blades changed for all my saws. So don't take a grinder to these. Take a flat file and just be very careful. Just stroke it a few times, and you might even want to try it. Cut a little bit. If it's not taken off, then take a couple more files off that. I call it the drag length, or I call it depth gauge, because it basically determines the depth of your chisel cut. What's nice about these steel sharpening systems, they have a flat file built into the system, so you don't have to worry about going back and taking a flat file to that depth gauge. So basically what it is, it allows you to go all around the saw with one motion and do everything at once. So basically what you're doing is you're filing the tooth down, and you're doing the depth gauge and everything. You're sharpening and filing down at the same time. But you gotta be careful. Just because this is in a container, you can still push too hard, and you can still take too much off that drag length or that depth gauge. So even though you're using a system, you do not want to put too much pressure down, because I've done it before and I pushed real hard, and I actually did take too much off there. So you still want to use the same amount of pressure every time. But what's nice about this, the way it's built, it already has your angle basically built in. So if you follow that same angle back and forth, if you keep it flush on both sides, you should be at the right angle. So that's a second checkpoint. You got two checkpoints in the beginning and the end of your stroke. So just keep that same angle and keep a little bit of down pressure, and this can really help you. If you're new at sharpening, it's a great tool because it'll allow you to keep on the exact angle that you want. And what's nice too is you can open this up and replace the files, and you can use this on more than one size of chainsaw. What I do is I have 3 of these. I have a small, medium, and large. That way I can just grab one and sharpen my saws, and then if I need a bigger one, I just grab the next one. So they're only like 30 or 40 bucks. So you can grab, if you only have one size, you only need one. But if you have 2 or 3 different sizes of saws, you don't have to switch out the files every time. Just buy a couple more, and they last forever. So it's not like you have to replace them as long as you don't lose them. And another nice thing too is when you're sharpening, using this device, you can actually, I think you flip it over, and you can actually sharpen the other side by pulling. So basically, you can sharpen, and then the next tooth you just flip it, and then you sharpen this way. So you don't even really have to, especially if you have a vise, you can just keep flipping it back and forth and sharpening. You can sharpen the whole thing at once. Instead of having to sharpen one side and flip it over, you just basically keep sharpening until the whole saw is sharp. So you sharpen this one, and then you flip it, and then you just basically, the only difference is you're pulling. So you pull back, sharpen that side, move the chain, flip it over, sharpen this side, and then you just keep doing that until the whole saw is sharp. So anyway, this is Roger with Roger's Reviews, and this is a newer style of sharpening by Steel. Kind of simplified things because you got everything in one kit. It has the flat file and your round file, so it's basically grinding down your drag length and your depth gauge at the same time you're sharpening. But again, don't put too much pressure on this because you can still basically take your drag length down too far and ruin your chain. So just because you have more room and more angle and more material pushed down, don't use it. Just still use common sense. You can put a little bit of pressure on there, but make sure before you do the second or third round that you check your saw. Because once you do your drag lengths too deep, you're gonna ruin your chain. You're gonna have to throw it away. So anyway, thanks for watching. This is just a basic 101 on chainsaw sharpening. Have a great day.